And once again, welcome on behalf of all of us here at the Graduate School for Education and Human Development, which is part of the George Washington University, which is located here in our nation's capital. I want to welcome you to our 2023 Black History Month event, which is entitled Queer as Black. For those of you who might not be as initiated, Queer as Black is sort of a turn of phrase on a very successful Showtime Viacom show called Queer as Folk, which for those who've the older millennials, was very insightful and impactful in expanding the acceptance of LGBT Americans, putting them out there as far as media representation. But not the one critique, but one of the major critiques of that show was a lack of Black and, quite frankly, Latino representation as well. We are here today to celebrate Black History Month, as only G-Shed knows how. It really started as a whisper in 1926, just 61 years after the end of the Civil War, just 60 years, one generation or so after emancipation. The historian Carter G. Woolsey and the Association for the Study of Negro Life announced that the second week in February would be Negro History Week. It was so chosen because the birthday of Abraham Lincoln, who we say freed the slaves, I like to say assisted in freeing the slaves, and the birthday of Frederick Douglass, which was February 12th and February 14th, respectively, coincided with that second week. And since then, we have seen that explode into an entire month and a movement that tries to have Black history throughout the entire year as well. We are here today to celebrate both the past, the present, and the future. So as we start, I would like to start by just uplifting a few names, as we are here to sort of answer the question posed by someone who shall go unnamed. Well, what is, why is queer theory an important part of Black history? So if you turn to the chat, I'll put a few links in there as we start. I would like to start by uplifting the name of my frat brother, Alain Leroy Locke, a philosopher and a leader of the Harlem Renaissance. Locke Hall, in fact, at Howard University, which houses the College of Arts and Sciences, is named after Alain Leroy Locke. And of course, the best thing about him is he pledged the greatest fraternity in the world, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. Alain Leroy Locke was a member of the queer or LGBT community. We uplift the names such as Audre Lorde, who left us with the unfathomable wisdom that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And today we uplift names such as Byron Rustin, who is a complicated figure, and I don't agree with always, but was one of the architects of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, and was forced to take a back seat because of his sexuality. Those are names from the past that have led names toward the present and the future. Names like E. Patrick Johnson, who is now the Dean of Communications and the Amberg University Professor of Performance Studies and African American Studies at Northwestern University. Names like Roderick Ferguson, who has come up with the concept of a queer critique of color and who now has the distinguished pleasure of teaching at Yale as the Robert Cole Professor of Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. And I want to uplift a recent endeavor started by some independent BIPOC scholars, the Center for Black and Queer Studies, who is looking out to try to make sure that the connection between Brown and Black folks and queer studies stays alive. There's a lot of interesting work there as well. So how did this come about? Well, 2023 has already been a crazy year, but one of the crazy things that have actually sort of happened was what should have been a triumph for this entire month, with the College Board's AP announcing the creation of an AP Advanced Placement course, for those that don't know, in African American Studies. However, that effort was co-opted. That effort was, stymied by a political announcement out of Florida that they would not take that because, well, I guess it was too woke for them, sleepy Florida. However, one of the things that happened when asked about this, the governor of Florida said, why do you want to, not get this? And he said, well, one of the lessons in this AP course are queer theory. And who could say that queer theory is a strong part of Black history? Well, since the governor ask the question, we will endeavor to answer it here today. Here at GSHED, we don't move away from hard issues, we run straight towards them in our mission of scholarship, teaching, and service. And to do that here today, we have an all-star cast, one that hopefully will rival whatever you saw last week in Utah. We have Leslie Hall, who is the Director of Historically Black College and University Programs at the Human Rights Campaign. We have Jose Cadiz, which is the Director of Intercultural Affairs and the LGBT Research Center at Howard University, the Mecca, as they like to call it. And we have the hometown hero, AJ King, who is our Assistant Director of the Multicultural Student Service Center, as well as the LGBTQIA+ Research Center here at the George Washington University. These gentlemen and I are going to have a conversation for about 45 minutes or so on the topics that I've sort of alluded to. At that point in time, we will stop the recording and we will engage in what we like to call a no-holds-barred interaction with the audience, and then we'll send you on for the rest of your day. Finally, I just want to say that, the George Washington University, as a private institution, reserves the right to remove anyone that we think is here to disrupt this program. We've never had to do that. I hope not to do that, but I just want to let you know, or as my mother would say, you don't necessarily need to agree with everything you hear here, but if you want to stay here, you need to be respectful. All right? All right, so let's get started. With that said, I am going to ask these gentlemen to introduce themselves because I think their bios are so unique and so thick, as one scholar would say, that I don't think I could do it justice. AJ, we'll start with you. Jose, we'll go to you. And then Leslie, of course, last but not least, we'll finish with you. And the question is, just introduce yourselves rather. They can Google me after. Why are you here? How did you get here? What work do you do? AJ, we'll start with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. My name is AJ King, he, him, his pronouns, and I'm currently the Assistant Director of the Multicultural Student Services Center and LGBTQ Resource Center at George Washington University. How did I get into this work? So it really started back in 2009. I had a curiosity around sexual health amongst Black gay men specifically, because I was very young. I was just turning 18, 19 years old, and I was realizing that people who look like me were back to back testing positive for HIV, and I was very curious around what the why was behind that. Where I grew up in Herndon, Virginia, we had a very conservative, very white sexual education curriculum in our schools, which did not touch on any type of queer relationships in any capacity, and definitely not around the impact of HIV within the community. So I started volunteering at a nonprofit organization here in DC called SMILE, which focuses on LGBTQ youth, and then eventually became the HIV program manager there, where I was responsible for all the HIV testing and CDC curriculum called Many, Many, Many Voices. From there, I've worked at other nonprofits throughout the city, including Latin American Youth Center, Sasha Bruce, doing similar work, and then went on the biomedical side in 2010 at George Washington University in the Milken Institute, where I was focusing on research around PrEP. I switched gears a little bit. I got more involved in the arts side of Black queer youth, where I started a nonprofit organization for LGBTQ youth of color called Breaking Ground, where they're able to go through pretty intensive counseling, addressing their life stories, and then putting it on stage to tell their life stories around the unique issues that queer people of color face. While I was doing that, I was co-founder of the DC chapter of Impulse Group DC, which is a social advocacy group for gay men in the district with the 80% entertainment, 20% education model. Since then, I've came into higher ed. I started here at George Washington University last January, and I've just been having a fantastic time working with our students.
We keep AJ busy. Thank you for that. Jose, your turn. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself, how you got to your current role, and what do you do in that role?
Of course. So as you mentioned, my name is Jose Cadiz. I use he, him pronouns. Excuse my voice. I was actually at the game on Monday against Morgan State, Howard. and lost my voice. However, I am going to do my best to
Did
get
you all win?
We won the women's game and lost the men's game. However, you know, you win some, you lose some, right? That's the game of life. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Jose Cadiz, he, him pronouns. I am the director in the Intercultural Affairs and LGBTQ plus Resource Center at Howard University. As you all outside know, the Mecca. We are a new office here, but how I got here, I've been in higher education for over 12 years. I started off my freshman year of college in an LGBTQ plus resource center space without even knowing it'll come full circle. My freshman year, I didn't even know that I was, you know, LGBTQ, but I was still figuring out myself. College was where I actually did figure out who I was, and really did not ever want to leave a university, did never want to leave a college. So I knew that there had to be a space for me on campus. I've been in higher education, again, 12 years. This is my 5th institution up and down the East Coast. I have continued to work in community engagement. That's where I started, through social justice, and continue to work through all of the nuances outside of just the university, really connecting the lines. I grew up right outside of a university, and never did I ever get an invite in to campus. And so creating that space where I knew the feeling of our neighbors from surrounding communities that did not ever get the invite from the university, for marginalized communities outside of the doors and outside of the gates of those communities, I knew that there had to be a bridge, and I was going to be that bridge to get that there. So I started off in, again, community engagement, and transitioned over into the LGBTQ plus space about 3.5 years ago, where I was at the University of Maryland, looking and working through the COVID pandemic. And then we also helped out with the census as well. So creating all of those spaces and seeing that the most marginalized communities was the LGBTQ plus space, I knew that there had to be more work to be done. Specifically at the HBCU level, when I started at Howard, I was the assistant director of intercultural affairs. Quickly, I knew that there was a gap between our LGBTQ plus community here at Howard University, and just the level of acceptance, the level of belonging, and the sense of belonging here on campus. So I quickly spoke with a lot of my administration, and they were in full support of creating the space, creating the center, creating more positions to advocate for our students that identified in the LGBTQ plus space. In our office, in the Office of Intercultural Affairs in the LGBTQ plus Resource Center, we do service more than just our LGBTQ plus students. We also service our international students, our graduate students, our transfer students, as well as some religious-based organizations on our campus as well with the chapel. So we do have a plethora of different identities, and we do like to spearhead all of our programming with the notion of intersectionality and discovering self. So here I am today, really creating a space. We are looking currently to enhance the campus climate survey so that we can put that out there and see the data, because the data does not lie. So we are very data driven in our office. We do work off of a 3-tiered model, which we have created, which is the support and advocacy, education and awareness, and community building. If you walk on campus today, you will see a lot of our LGBTQ plus queer affirming spaces throughout the campus. Students are now more cognizant when they program. They're more inclusive, they're more diverse. Our schools and colleges are more diverse in language. We're looking through so many different years and generations of policies and procedures to really move our needle up into this space of pioneering and leading at the HBCU level.
No, thank you. That seems to be both difficult and important work, and that transitions very well to our last superstar. Leslie, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, how you got to your current position, and what do you do?
Certainly. Well, first, thank you all for the invitation. I really appreciate joining the George Washington University community today, and amongst friends. And so this also feels good. And there's a lot of familiar faces in the audience. So it's just really good to be here. So as introduced, I'm Leslie Hall. I'm the director of the HBCU program at the Human Rights Campaign. Been at HRC 7 years. The HRC is the largest civil rights organization on behalf of LGBTQ people. And the HBCU program has been around 7 years, while we've been doing HBCU work for about 20. In addition to that, I'm also a PhD candidate at Howard University in the Higher Ed Leadership and Policy Studies program. And so I'm able to marry my professional work with my scholarship and research. And so it feels really good. What I do at HRC is kind of three-pronged. We work with LGBTQ students in the leadership development capacity, building their skills to organize and to be their authentic selves on campus. We work with HBCU presidents to establish promising practices and policies on campus that support LGBTQ inclusion. And we engage LGBTQ alumni who really have been disenchanted with the institution since they left. Many of them were disenchanted while they were there. And so we work with institutions to build bridges to develop and reintroduce them into an institution that is inclusive and that sees them. And so all of that kind of works in tandem. Just to give you a quick note, we HBCUs have done a lot of work around this topic, but there is a ton of work to be done. Out of 104 or 5, depending on what day you look at it, HBCUs, there are only 6, maybe 5 or 6 HBCUs with LGBTQ centers on campus. And so that, you know, research shows that centers are the nucleus to getting a campus more inclusive and providing faculty and staff with those resources to support them in their quest to be more inclusive. And so that's just a little bit about me. How did I get into this work? I really kind of fell into this kind of DEI space. I've been in development at 2 institutions prior to this. I was working in an annual giving. So I was a fundraiser, and one of the member of our board, her husband, who serves on the board here at HRC, noticed my affinity for HBCUs. All of my degrees come from HBCU. She also knew I was openly gay. And so they just thought it was a perfect match, and it actually has been. So yeah, that's how I kind of got into this place.
No, wonderful. And I think that, you know, we have done a wonderful job of selecting some outstanding gentlemen to sort of have this conversation. I want to encourage the audience that, you know, please feel free to place your questions in the chat. We will get to a Q&A at the end, but this is just not a one-way conversation, sort of a 3D conversation. I'm going to try to get as many of my questions in with the gentleman as possible, but you're as much a part of this as anyone else. So let's just start off with some naming culture, right? So this event is called Queer is Black. However, we've used the term LGBTQ. We've put, you know, a QIA and a plus on it. You know, any one of you can answer this. Do you think that those terms are synonymous? Is queer LGBTQ? Is there something different than that? For the ones in the audience that might be students, faculty, that may just be confused or just don't know what term to use, how do you situate yourself personally towards that term queer? Anybody?
I guess I can go. So, you know, this has been a ongoing conversation, particularly within the Black community for some time now, for very layered reasons. You know, for me, queer is really the deviation from heteronormative practices and gender and sexual expression that is viewed as the norm under patriarchy, right? And so I think that when we look at the definition of queer, it's something that it's relatively new that we're using in a mainstream sense, right? We all know historically it was used as a derogatory term towards our community, and we tried to reclaim that word. But it's interesting because we've seen a bit of pushback of the word queer, particularly in the Black community, of what that looks like. You know, a lot of white queer identified individuals claim that, and they say, yes, I'm queer, this is all encompassing. This means the whole LGBTQ spectrum and everything, within that, where there's been a bit more resistance amongst the Black community. And so I think that it's a very interesting conversation. I think that there's many layered reasons behind that. It could be, a piece of that is historically what queer has meant for us. It could be, what does it mean for us to still, to claim that identity while still walking in our Blackness. I think that, there may be lack of information about what queer really means, right? So I think that there is difference, but not necessarily difference in definition, difference in perception of the word.
I would agree. So personally, I don't identify as queer. I identify as a Black gay man. And I notice a lot of the younger up and coming young people are identifying as queer as a label. And I actually spoke with one of our students that we just had at our leadership summit about it. And he told me that identifying as gay only shares one part of him, who he has sex with. And not the whole part of him of how he lives his life and things and so forth. And it actually made a lot of sense. I still don't identify as queer. I'm on the older end of the millennial spectrum, and so queer is not, that wasn't it back then. But I truly understand it as an umbrella political kind of term, and really a term of resistance, honestly, against like the binary. And I think more and more we are approaching a community or an environment where people just don't want to be put into one box. And so depending on who you talk to, queer can be many things, right? Like I'm using actually queer theory in my dissertation. And so I've been like interrogating this a lot about what does it mean, what does it mean for our community, and what does it mean as resistance. But personally, queer is not, I don't relate to queerness as an identity, but certainly as a way to see the world and to view other people.
Yeah, I think you're both really saying so much when it comes to queer, and I think that it is identity based, right? It's self-identity, and I think that students and anyone that identifies in these spaces have a right and a duty to identify within themselves. And so when I'm having these conversations, I am using the term LGBTQ plus instead of queer, until someone identifies in that queer space. And then I start to allow myself to respect that term with that specific person. I think when it comes to intersectionality, when it comes to how we identify and all of the identities and the ever so evolving identities that I'm still learning today about myself, on Tuesday, I might be queer. On Wednesday, I might be a gay Black man. On Thursday, these spaces require so much grace. And so requiring to get to know the individual person is what's important, and what I'm teaching to fortify our student queerness and the spaces of LGBTQ plus here at Howard. So unpacking so many different things, reclaiming, I heard reclaiming, right? The word. So those things, like, what does that mean to reclaim? How are you unpacking all of these different spaces where we have been marginalized, we have been criticized, we have been, put into these boxes, and now we're opening these words of nuance and creating spaces for conversation. So I think that we are in those spaces of conversation because we are just evolving as a people.
That's deep. That's deep. I've got like 4,050 follow-ups, but I'll stay on script. I got to learn to focus. We're here also to talk about history. So whether it be LGBT history or queer history, however you want to define it, do either or all of you gentlemen have a sort of Black queer role model from history. I started off with mine, Elaine Leroy Locke. As a philosopher, I like to think of myself as something like that. You know, I will identify with him, same fraternity. You know, it could be, let me not poison it by giving names. I'll let you go. Anyone have someone that they want to pick out of Black history and say, that's my LGBT or queer role model?
So I'll just hop in and say, you have mine, Dr. Wright. Elaine Locke, I actually just posted something about him yesterday on IG. Elaine Locke is someone that is my patron scholar. You said because y'all part of the same fraternity, I actually relate to a lot of his upbringing. I relate a lot to how he views the world, and his idea of aesthetics, the importance of arts and culture, are all things that it's like I'm looking at myself. And the last piece that I think is really fascinating about him is his ability to mentor other LGBTQ folks in the Harlem Renaissance. He was also a very complicated individual. And I also think that I can be very complicated in some of my views, and a lot of people be like, "Oh, you work at HRC, but you believe that," and I'm like, "Well, you know, that's just kind of how it is." And I think, you know, as I've learned more and more about Elaine Locke, and I must just also add, he was a faculty at Howard until he retired in 1953 and died in 1954. And so, you know, you got to represent the home team there as well. So Elaine Locke would be my person.
No, very well, very well, very well. Hosea, AJ, anyone to add?
Yeah, I would jump in, and also an unsung hero to one of the civil rights activists, you know, Bayard Rustin. I've been really looking, and I'll say this on my Instagram, every day this month, I've been highlighting Black LGBTQ plus individuals in history. So, I mean, Bayard Rustin is the one that got the most wide eyes from my followers. Just like, whoa, I never knew that there was an individual behind the civil rights movement, March on Washington, that was LGBTQ plus. And I said, okay, and that's why I'm doing this, right? Like, that's why I'm providing these fun, amazing Black history, LGBTQ plus facts to the followers that, you know, we engage in. That's what social media is for. It's for use of education, use of, you know, really utilizing the spaces that we, you know, that we have to highlight these individuals. So yeah, I mean, I would say Bayard Rustin is someone that I have looked up to and looked to for guidance in this silent fight.
Yeah, you are. Hear you. AJ, anybody to add? Don't feel pressured.
Absolutely. You know, the Queen, Marsha P. Johnson, right? So a lot of us know Marsha P. Johnson for you know, her activism in Stonewall, right? And you know, how cis white men got a lot of the credit for that. But what a lot of people also don't know is that she was actually, you know, one of the founders of the Street Transgender Action Revolutionaries, which really focused on providing housing for sex workers and LGBTQ youth at the time. And she was also a huge HIV/AIDS advocate back in the day. So she's someone who's, you know, very near and dear to my heart. But more personally, Lee Hayes and Patrick Ian Polk were some of the first individuals to really provide media representation for the Black gay community. You know, Lee Hayes, I was reading his books as a young teenager. It showed the good, beautiful, bad, and ugly of relationships. And then we all know Patrick Ian Polk and what he provided with Noah's Ark, and, you know, a lot of the media and TV shows that finally showed representation for our community.
Ooh, those are some really good answers. Those are some really, really good answers. Folks, remember, we have about maybe 20, 25 minutes before we transition to the Q&A, but feel free at any point to put your questions in the chat. Fellas, are you ready for some of the hard questions? You knocked the softball questions out of the sky, but, you know, now we want to sort of dig a little deeper. You know, we understand that through the concepts that are still trying to be banned right now, like intersectionality, that while we all may be oppressed as Black and brown people, we're not all oppressed equally, that there is something known as double marginalization, triple marginalization. You know, the least of these have a lot of different axes of marginalization. Leslie, you do a lot of work on LGBTQ centers. Jose, you're leading one at HBCU. It comes out to, less than 2%. But even you, AJ, if you look at the LGBT centers of predominantly white institutions, they are still dominated in their directorship by men. When people think of the LGBTQ population, a lot of it is still dominated by men. So as I look into the presenters here today, I don't know this to be true, but I would assume, what happens when you assume that we're all cisgender males. What responsibility do male members of the LGBTQ community have for recognizing our own privilege and looking back and making sure that as these LGBTQ centers happen on HBCUs, that some of those directors may be women, transgender, cisgender women, right? Or AJ, what responsibility do we have on the predominantly white campus to make sure that the only representation of Black, brown, LGBT is not, just Black and brown men? Anyone want to take that easy question?
I'll go ahead and begin because this is something that I've been really working towards and fighting to have the representation in our office, in our resource center, specifically for our self-identified women and non-binary and transgender women here on campus to be more visible. So visibility and accessibility is where I've begun to have the conversation with, self-identifying trans Black women on our campus. We have been developing a fireside chat currently for non-binary and transphobia. This is led by our trans community here on campus. So again, if you have the platform and the spaces to codify these conversations, it continues to be kind of diluted in a way and kind of suppressed as well. Unconsciously, right? This is a way that we just kind of navigate. So for me, I'm consciously putting these individuals at the forefront of the visibility for our office to understand that here at Howard University, especially in our LGBTQ plus resource center, that we have a space that not only tolerates this or has resources for it, but we uplift it, we celebrate it. We are making sure that you are here, you're seen, you're coming to us and letting us know what the needs are, what the education is, the knowledge base that students around you need to know so that you don't have to feel ostracized or you are not feeling that you can't walk in your true purpose or in your true colors anywhere here on campus, but we're also putting that education piece to it as well. So that means from the staff and faculty side, working with the provost's office, working with our VP of Student Affairs, our AVPs of Student Affairs, they've been 1000% supportive. Even, President Frederick has been continuously supportive of the efforts that we've done on and off campus as well. I think one of our biggest things that I want to continue to highlight is our external partners, individuals like HRC, HBCU programs in Leslie Hall, where we constantly have conversations about how to create visibility and accessibility for our trans community and our lesbian community on campus, our bisexual community on campus, because those are the most marginalized in the LGBTQ plus spaces. And we want to make sure that we uplift, and then there's knowledge behind it. Yes, there's tons of research for gay men, gay Black men, Latinx individuals, but a lot of the resources are always going to these spaces. And so for me, when we have resources on our campus or that come to me with ideas, I'm saying, okay, well, we need to be cognizant of the resources that we have and the equitable aspect of moving things through all of our community, not just our gay and lesbian community, not just our trans community, but every single person needs to be seen in the programs that we put on here on campus.
Yeah, I'll follow up with that and say when you were asking the question, I kept hearing allyship. And what does that mean? How to be an ally of folks that traditionally have not gotten a seat at the table, or we just don't immediately come to mind. And so when I think about that, I think about allyship as where does the center of power kind of, where does power kind of center? And so do we have a responsibility as cis? I do identify as being a cis Black gay male. Yeah, we do, because on a good day, I can be a little, I'm more masculine, before 5. And so that provides me access to rooms and spaces that trans people, specifically Black trans women, just won't have or don't have. And so it is my responsibility to crack open the door and, quite frankly, bring them with me. And it's also understanding the realities that not just Black trans women, but Black women in general, right? Black women has been the most disrespected species on this planet. And so when I think about that, like at the rate that Black trans women are being murdered in this country, if it was any other group of people, we would have had a blue ribbon White House commission on how to stop it. But it's not happening. And so, yes, I'm a Black man, and that carries its own kind of dilemmas out in society, but I'm also cis. Can be masculine presenting at times. And so that provides me with access, that provides me with a level of privilege that some folks just don't have. And it's important for me to leverage that privilege. My grandmother used to always say this phrase. She says, you reap shade from trees that you did not plant. And that is a way that I kind of position my gratitude and also my purpose to bring folks along. And so do we have a responsibility? I think we do. I think we do have a responsibility. Yeah.
Yes. So before AJ, you go, I want to uplift Rhonda in the chat that said non-gender conforming women who are not trans are also impacted, right? And I think that we've done marvelous work on college campuses of pulling that apart, right? Biological sex is not gender identity. Gender identity is not gender expression, and I think that, the other, those that do not conform to the hetero white patriarchal norm under our neo-capitalistic system are being hurt. And that's why we're having this conversation. AJ, do you want to add to that last question?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to echo what everyone said. I mean, we have a critical responsibility to center the focus our non-binary and trans students and faculty and staff, because many times, as Leslie had mentioned, we have the privilege, we have the key, even as Black, Latino, gay men, we have more access and privilege. And so we're very intentional at our center of making sure that we have the representation and voice of our trans and non-binary students. So we actually have a student org called TNBS, which is for our students who are trans, non-binary identified. And I'm very intentional on having many conversations with those students to ensure that their needs are met and that the programs that they want to see are happening. For our Trans Awareness Week, we actually shut down our Multicultural Student Services Center at nighttime so that they could have a sleepover, a late night sleepover specifically for trans non-binary students to do programming and watch movies and play games. And then we were able to actually do a projection on our building at GW campus for Trans Awareness Week of our trans sisters and brothers who we lost due to violence. And so we definitely wanted to make sure that we're focusing on that advocacy. We also have 100% free trans tape available in our center, so students can come in and just confidentially take whatever they need. And we have a program called Queer and BIPOC, which focuses on our BIPOC queer students around conversations that impact our community. And one of our upcoming topics is going to be around cisgender relationships and interactions with those who are non-cisgender. So we're going to have very important dialogue around that in the coming future. So yes, we have that responsibility. It is critical. We've got to be the voice for those who don't have the opportunity to have voice, and make room so that they can eventually have voice.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Folks, I'm going to try to sneak in maybe 2 more questions. Might just get to 1 before we get to the audience Q&A. And I'm going to be careful to try to not get this question here from a deficit sort of model, because I don't want it to be that. And I want to roll 2 questions into 1. The question is, Leslie, Jose, maybe you're more equipped to answer this. I am someone that graduated from an HBCU, and I think it would be not within the tradition, the Black radical tradition, not to ask not only what took so long at the Mecca to get an LGBTQ center, but what's taken so long at the other HBCUs, right? It is 2023, intersectionality is a thing. Not to say that the Black community is any more or less homophobic than any other community, right? We've got great work done by people like Stephen Mobley out of Morgan State on that, right? But the question is, what took so long? And then, AJ, Jose, are there things that predominantly white institutions can learn from the emergent efforts of HBCUs, and things that HBCUs could work and learn from the more established, predominantly white LGBT centers? Of course, many people did a lot of things wrong, but is there some osmosis there? So those two questions sort of roll into one. Have at it.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and begin and just say that there's timing, and there's always the right time, and there's always a wrong time, and who knows the timing, right? I think it's always, in my own personal opinion, it's always on God's time. And so I think that for me currently in my position, in my role, I had coming into it, had a responsibility and a duty to continue to push the agenda of people that have come before me, that have paved the way to even support our LGBTQ plus students on campus before I even arrived onto Howard's campus, because there were, even if it wasn't in their job descriptions, they were supporting our LGBTQ plus students. Now, in its formality, there's a lot of change that had to be done within the scope of how we are putting out the resource center without it being performative. And so, it had to be done well. It had to be done with a with an attitude of, an open mind and an open heart. And again, I think our students would have resisted if it was done out of performativeness. And so creating a space where students are now comfortable, and we're in a whole new generation. I mean, I think we came back from COVID, and these students are like, this is what we want. This is not what we are asking for in terms of, can we do this, right? And so I think that our students have a voice here on campus that really echoes generations and shakes up the masses of students that have come before, and the alum that have paved, so many different paths. But the work at Howard University started in the LGBTQ place in 1970, which is now Cascade. And so the first and oldest running HBCU LGBTQ plus student-run, student-led organization was here at Howard University. And so creating that space and fortifying the spaces that those students from the 1970s all the way to now, 50 years later, are still moving things and creating spaces and really putting things into perspective where, no, we didn't do a good job, and we have a lot of wrong to right, and we're doing that, right? But we still have to be student-centered, student-facing, and developing these different spaces for students with the intention that it's sustainable. Because if it was done any sooner, if it was done 10, 15 years ago, the sustainability of the office, it would not have lasted. And so creating this space now, I mean, yes, at I was at a PWI with an LGBTQ plus resource center 15 years ago, right? But we're talking about HBCUs in a space where we are going to have conversations around the roots, the religious roots of an HBCU. And those are spaces where that conversation 15, 20 years ago would not have gone well with the alum population, with the administrative population, maybe back then. But now our students are not backing down from the inclusivity, the diversity aspect of having an LGBTQ plus resource center, really being cognizant of diverse programming, of intersectionality conversations, of rehauling policies and procedures that are very binary, syllabus being inclusive, gender pronouns and being used, and also preferred names from the enrollment aspect, from the first experience you get from applying to Howard all the way through matriculating and graduating, and what that diploma says is your name, right? Like that name that you go by. We're having these conversations now. And I think geographically, we often have to think about it. Howard is in a very unique space as an HBCU, where many HBCUs are not in a very safe environment. They're in the deep South, and it's not a very conducive space for this type of movement and having an LGBTQ plus space in those at those universities.
Yeah, I can expound upon that. I think, like, that's a really loaded question. How it took so long, because I think HBCUs are just birthed out of the, Black community. And so when you look at the root of it, HBCUs were founded in the basement of churches. And so a lot of that rhetoric, a lot of that, the belief system that we do, a lot of HBCUs still carry some of the same traditions of the religious affiliation that it has. That's one particular issue. I think, Jose alluded to this, the time. The times are shifting. Students are being more unapologetic and more open about what it is they need. I'm not suggesting that there weren't gay students in the 60s or 50s or 40s, but those students, you were not out at those times. And we shared a little bit about Byard Rustin. He wasn't, in a lane lock, like they weren't out, as if they wanted to be. And so that was part of it. The other thing is, and Jose brought this up as well, it's still not popular in many states. You could still be fired from your jobs in many of these states if you identify as LGBTQ. As we see in Florida, there's a governor that takes surgical precision to attacks of folks that believe something different than he does. And a few years ago, North Carolina, the University of North Carolina system bucked the state of North Carolina when they passed the bathroom bill around bathrooms, and you had many HBCUs in the state, saying that they weren't going to enforce it. And so I think there is a cumulative kind of thought now that we are in a different time. I train at a lot of HBCUs, and we're guilty of having folks there for 40 and 50 years, and I'm going to these trainings, and God bless her, but the dean of whatever been there since 1977, and we're telling her about pronouns and intersectionality, and she has no understanding. And then you have other new faculty, junior faculty that are coming in and totally understanding this concept. And so what took so long is just a matter of it's a matter, I think, of circumstance. And you have to kind of draw the chronological line of what's been happening politically, what's happening socially, and also religiously. I just returned earlier today, this morning, from the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, which is a convening of Black faith leaders and community leaders all coming together to advance social justice principles. And they had their very first same gender loving preacher to do the evening worship. And that was huge, right? And these are Baptist churches and United Churches of Christ and things like that. And so I think the ground is now fertile for this type of conversation. And lastly, I have to say this: we have to stop comparing our struggles to whiteness and to white places, what's been happening there. One of the reasons why there aren't more HBCU LGBTQ centers is because it costs. It's not, you just can't say, oh, here's a center and leave it there. Like, you got to staff that joint. You got to, programming and budgets and things like that. And so there is a lot of reasons why we aren't further along. But I think students being unapologetic about what they want and what they require, paying these exorbitant amount of tuition dollars is probably one of the real impetus for seeing more change happening on campuses.
AJ, anything to add to that, and anything on what predominantly white institutions can learn from the HBCU experience, what HBCUs might learn from the predominantly white experience, either positively or negatively?
Sure. So also echoing Leslie, this is a very loaded question for a lot of different reasons. So first, I want to say that, I acknowledge that at PWIs, as Leslie mentioned, that many times there is a difference when it comes to how much money is really at the institution and what we're able to provide for these students, right? And so there is a certain privilege at PWIs to be able to have the access to LGBT resource centers. That being said, I think that regardless whether it's an HBCU or PWI, one thing that we could all learn cohesively is that piece around continuum of care, right? So we have these incoming freshmen that come in. Many times it's their first taste of independence and being on their own and discovery of identity. They come in, there's a resource center available, whether the HBCU or the PWI, they're able to express themselves, they're able to come out, they're able to find community. And then they got to go back to, that Bible Belt in the South to go see their family, as a gay man after they just found this taste of freedom. They've got to go back to that, place in middle America where their family lives, where they're trans-identified and they were able to express themselves, in that major city, but not so much there. And what does that continuum of care look like, particularly if they don't have the access to community resources that they had on campus, right? And that's not only internally with the campus, but what's going on outside of their bubble within their university experience. So, whether it's trans affirming services, HIV testing, even the social scene, right? And so I think that one thing that we could all learn is, what does developing closer community resources look like? What does having a plan for continuum of care for our students look like? And how do we cross-collaborate more amongst HBCUs and PWIs, considering especially that PWIs do have queer students of color and LGBT students of color, right? One thing, everyone on this call, we're currently working on a upcoming project as a consortium in the DMV so that all of our queer students of color are feel represented. So I think that we can't also work in these silos, right? Because we all have a similar mission. So more communication and collaboration, I think, is just going to benefit all of us.
No, great. And this has been great. We're going to move to Q&A, but I want one last question only because I said we were going to address it. And I am going to limit you, gentlemen, unfortunately, to 2 minutes, and you'll see why. Your answers have been great. It's not about that. If you had 2 minutes with the governor of Florida to explain why the agenda that he is pushing is hurting all students, what would you say? And I'm going to limit you to 2 minutes because you're not going to get more than 2 minutes, right? So I want it to be a little bit of a realistic exercise. And all my students in the audience know I love to do this. So if you had 2 minutes, what would you say? And the question is, so let me say this and send a hate mail to Dr. Dwayne Wright. What he did was he tried to divide the Black community Willie Lynch style by blaming queer theory for his retraction of AP African American Studies, right? So that's the framing that I gave. Once again, send the hate mail to Dwayne Wright. I said that. But if you had, 2 minutes with him, what would you say? And I'm timing you.
Okay, so this is a program, so I'll keep it appropriate. If I had 2 minutes with him, I would just give him a list of things to read, honestly. Ron DeSantis demonstrates every day that while he attended some of the top institutions in this country, he's not a very bright person because he reduces some of these very large concepts to a very stupid kind of way of thinking. And I would also, he just, I don't know, he shows a real disregard for a lack of criticalness and anti-intellectualism that it's just stupid. It's just really dumb. And he doesn't understand the importance of intersectionality. He doesn't understand the importance of the Black experience as it contributes to the overall American experience. And it's dangerous because it is a whistle to awaken, Jim Crow. And this is like Jim Crow. This is the old playbook that they're doing, banning books, banning curriculum, banning things that, are things that you read about other countries and other countries. So if I had 2 minutes, I mean, I would say a whole lot of other things to Ron DeSantis. We could talk about that at the after hour of this, but that's what I would say to him.
Thank you. With 30 seconds left, Jose, AJ, do you want to
Yeah,
start?
so I would go in, I mean, obviously very emotional and very irate at the rhetoric that he has continued to perpetuate in his, not only in his home state, but throughout his colleagues in the Republican Party as well. And so creating space not only to have, you know, him, as Leslie mentioned, read and really share stories from parents and from LGBTQ plus spaces and people that, you know, lives that have been changed due to the people fortifying the spaces to be who they are, the intersectionalities, to have people teach them about who they are, and the importance of having you know, the books and education aspects of it. And so I think that aspect, I mean, even just the mere, we already have one of actually the worst healthcare system in anywhere. And so not giving them the opportunity to treat and to talk about the health education pieces, it's only going to hurt his constituents and for generations, not only this generation, for generations to come. And so, I mean, I would call him many, many things, along with all of his, you know, different conspirators, people that are behind him and supporting this. And I mean, we have to look at the people that are funding him as well, you know, those corporations, and really look at how we're a lot, I mean, emotional at this point, right? So, I mean, I just think that that's something that we should definitely do. I mean, I'm at work, so I will not, you know, say anything other than that.
No, we'll save the other stuff for the key that I'm sure we'll have.
Right.
AJ, why don't you wrap us up, and then we'll go to questions. We'll start with the esteemed Dr. Jonathan Eckel once AJ is done, and then I'll go to the chat, folks. We have about 15 or so minutes left, so please let the questions come in. We'll stop the recording, so feel free to be your, you know, uncensored self. But AJ, why don't you wrap us up? 2 minutes with the governor of Florida.
Sure, I'll make it very brief. I mean, you know, I also would go in guns blazing, period. You know, I would first ask him how many, and give me names of the queer identified and Black Florida residents that you sat down with and had these conversations. Since you're working for the people, what conversations have you had with them, and what input have you got from them about what their needs are? I would then go put the statistics and research around homelessness, HIV rates, suicide rates in front of him, and the correlation around how his policies are impacting that, and ask him, so if you're seeing this correlation, why are we moving forward in this direction? Because I would love to hear his answers recorded for, you know, everyone to see about how he feels that this is appropriate, or how we're going to be able to move forward from this. After that, like I said, you know, I have a couple more words that is saved for the Kiki, but I really just want him to verbalize, because we all know what the messaging is, right? It's not said. We all know what he feels and thinks. I would love him to actually hear it out of his mouth. Once the research and the data and all the experience and testimonies right in front of him, I would love to hear him actually say it out loud and not be a coward.
With that said, why don't we stop the recording and go to audience Q&A? This is the point where we invite